allowing us to share this time together. I want you to turn to Matthew chapter 2, verse 19. We've been spending last Sunday and this Sunday in this particular passage, attempting to see in this fourth Christmas narrative what God has for us. And we want to continue in that this morning. So we're going to actually look at two passages. One is in chapter 2, verse 1, and the other is in chapter 2, verse 19. And those two passages and their stories are very significant to us. There are four Christmas narratives that have been given to us as we've been relating this already to you. He starts out in the book of Matthew, of course, by giving us this genealogy. And when he concludes that, he begins verse 18 of chapter 1 with the first Christmas narrative. We're calling it the emerging of Jesus because it actually relates to us the birth of Christ himself. And that takes place in verse 18 down through verse 25. Again, to lay this out for you, because you need this information for what we're going to say to make sense, if it can. Chapter 2, verse 1, down through verse 12 is the second Christmas narrative. It's the story of the wise men. It's the exaltation of Christ, exaltation of Jesus. They're coming into the city, and they're, of course, asking, "Where's your new king?" And Herod was troubled in all Jerusalem with him. The third narrative is given to us in chapter 2, verse 13. It begins there. And it is, of course, the story of Herod's deceit and the flight into Egypt by Christ and his mother and Joseph, of course, and the exile into Egypt. And so we're calling that the exile of Jesus. And he is spared when Herod has pronounced an edict that would kill all the baby boys in Bethlehem and the surrounding districts. And in verse 19, we have the last Christmas narrative, which goes down through the end of the chapter, which, of course, is the excursion of Jesus. He is now, an angel has appeared and called them back because Herod was dead. We didn't make these narratives up. We didn't single them out. We didn't divide them up. That wasn't our choice. That was Matthew's choice. And as we've related to you before, the way he marked these passages, these narratives out, was he started each one with the same word. Now, it probably isn't that way in your translation. I've not found any translations that do that. But literally, in the Greek language, they all start with the same identical word. And it's the little Greek word de, D-E, which is the primary translation, is the translation but, the conjunction but, which immediately sets up contrast. So I'm proposing to you today that these narratives are a whole series of contrasts. And that what he's doing is not just writing nice stories, but he's giving you one picture, contrasting another picture with it, then giving you another picture which contrasts with those two pictures, and it's a whole series of contrasts. Now, obviously, we're not going to be able to do all of the contrasts today, but they are just absolutely phenomenal as you begin to lay them out and see the depth of the story becomes much clearer when you begin to see it in the contrasting form. It's really interesting that in verse 18 of chapter 1, he begins this first narrative with this Greek word, but. And he's given you 42 generations of, and we've studied this in Christology class, but 42 generations in verse 1 through 17 of the genealogy, and then comes up thundering into verse 18 and says, but Joseph really didn't have anything to do with this. So what I've given you, well, basically was a waste of time. Let me tell you the real fact here. Jesus was born of God. And you got a contrast. Two genealogies. 42 generations, taking it down through the lineage of King David. And over on this side, no 42 genealogies, no 42 generations, no lengthy passage, no 17 verses, just, hey, born of God. And the only explanation for Jesus is, born of God. So that starts the first narrative. Then in this first narrative, there's 8 verses in this narrative, and 6 of them start with this word but, the conjunction, giving you a whole series of contrasts within, isn't this exciting, folks? Within the first narrative. So he just walks you through these contrasts, these over here is one picture and over here is another. So there's just contrast all over. He just labels these passages with that. Now the contrast that we want to get into today is found in chapter 2, verse 1 and chapter 2, verse 19. Chapter 2, verse 1 says, "Now after Jesus was born." In verse 19, it says, "Now when Herod was dead." Now remember, if you go to the original language, the Greek language, the now is really the Greek word conjunction but, day. But after Jesus was born. And in verse 19, but when Herod was dead. And he's setting up contrast. In chapter 2, verse 1, I want us to look at that first contrast. But after Jesus was born. Obviously, he's contrasting the birth of Christ on this side. He says, over on this side, I want to contrast that with the first narrative. What is the first narrative about? Well, it begins in verse 18, goes down through the end of chapter 1. The first narrative is all about Joseph. We're seeing everything through the eyes of Joseph. If you want the woman's view of this, you have to go to the Gospel of Luke, and you see how Mary felt about this whole thing. But this is all about focusing on Joseph, his situation. You understand that he's gone down to Mary's parents, and he's entered into a contract with them. He gave them 5 cows. That's not true. He paid the dowry, whatever that was. I'm relating it to Africa. So he paid the dowry, whatever that was. And he has set up the contract which has brought the marriage together. Legally, they are married at the signing of the contract. The first year, they enter into a betrothal period, which is 1 year. It's a probation period. It's for the fact of getting things ready. So Joseph is busy about the house. Hey, he's adding on a room, going to have kids, lots of kids, add another one. And then lo and behold, he's fixing the cabinets in the cupboard, in the kitchen, and he's getting all that, the kitchen like she wants it. And he's probably talked to her about this. They have very little contact during this time. In fact, no contact at all, basically. And if he wants to say something to Mary or ask her a question, he sends a friend of his who's called the best man. That's where we got the concept, folks. The best man concept. So the best man is the runner between the two. And so he has no physical contact, doesn't see her very much. He has found out that she has gone down to Elizabeth's house. And that's, a relative. Hey, that's fine. But she stayed for 3 months. That's a little unusual, but, it's an unusual time. So it's all okay, but the marriage is all set up and everything is good and he's getting all ready. And can you imagine what his anticipation is inside? He loves her. He's been planning on this. He scraped together the money or whatever it was to pay the dowry. He's getting the house all set up. He's making plans. He's dreaming about what his life is going to be like with her. He can hardly wait for the marriage ceremony to take place at the end of the year. Then they'll move in together. It's going to be a wonderful time. All the anticipation of marriage and home and companionship and all that's going on. He's a just man. He's interested in raising a godly family. He's got all of this going on inside of him. Man, he's just excited about it. He's going all out. Even painted the fence in the front white. Oh, it's a white picket fence. Whoa, this is good. And he's got the whole thing laid out in his mind and his heart. He's working hard at it. After 3 months, Mary comes back. She's giving physical evidence to the birth, to the pregnancy. Well, Nazareth isn't a very big town. Come on, you can hear them. Oh, now we know why she's been gone for 3 months. And everybody's talking. She's not said anything. Isn't that interesting? She's not said anything to Joseph. That would have been the first thing I'd have done if I had been in her shoes. I'd have run to him and said, oh, I got to explain this to you. Not my fault. She gave no explanation to him. Hey, God revealed it to her. Isn't that a unique approach to life? Instead of me trying to defend myself to you and straighten you out so you are in on this, hey, God revealed it to me. I'm going to let him handle you. I don't know if he's adequate for you or not. Well, I've not been adequate. So maybe the only shot we've got is him. So she backs off. She's not communicated to him at all. So in the midst of all of this, he hears about this. He doesn't believe it. It's a wild rumor. You know how people are. Good night. She just ate a lot of candy when she was down there. He refuses to believe it. He sends the best man to check it out. And the best man comes back and says, it's true. Come on, put yourself in his shoes. Devastation of that. What kind of conclusion can you come to? You only have one conclusion. I'm not responsible, Joseph knows. So it must be, she's had an affair. She's been unfaithful. I just can't believe she would. What on earth? Why would she? How could this is, he can't possibly marry her. Because if he married her, what that would mean is he would be saying to everybody in town, I'm the guilty party. And he's not. And he cannot identify with her sin. He's a just man. Morally, he can't do that. Why, he ought to take her right down. The only real way out of this is to take her down to the Jewish courts and have her stoned to death. That was by law. And that would vindicate him and put him up a little notch in the eyes of the community. But he doesn't want to do that. I don't want to. And yet he should, but he's a just man. The only thing he knows to do is run away from this as fast and as far as he can get. And he's just going to give her a divorce and wipe his hands of this whole situation. Do you understand? Feel this with him. He's in a dilemma. There's no way out of this. There isn't a right thing to do. It's not, I'll do this and then it'll all go away. It's not going to go away. This is such a gigantic, overwhelming mess. Reputations, family relationships, the people of Nazareth, his business people, the people that hire him to do that, everything is affected by this. The whole future of his life is all in this overwhelming dilemma. Oh, there's no way out of this. What a mess. I can't do the right. There's no way to crawl. This is just, you can't get out of this. This is. Ever been there? Let's just undo this. Let's just take a step back. Ever been there? But ladies and gentlemen, the contrast is that in the midst of the moral dilemma, in the midst of the mess you can't get out of, in the midst of the overwhelming pressure of the circumstances that you may not even have created, in the midst of everything that's going on in your life, in the midst of the confusion that can't be cleared up, in the midst of the questions that don't have answers, in the midst of the battles that can't be won, in the midst of all the moral dilemma you find yourself in, I tell you, but Jesus is born. Woo! Isn't that good news? He specializes, is coming in the middle of my moral dilemmas. In the messes I can't straighten out, he will show up. He will appear. You can count on it. And when there's nothing but darkness, the light, the light of the world, will show up. He has promised that. He's dedicated himself to it. He specializes in that. That's what he's all about. In the middle of a moral dilemma, Jesus is born. First contrast. Verse 19. Chapter 2, verse 19. But when Herod was dead. What's that all about? Well, Herod is the Great. He's called Herod the Great. They don't call him that due to his size. He's Herod the Great because he's a powerful man. He's over large territories. He's under the authority of the Roman Caesar. He's got lots of power. Herod speaks a word and it is carried out and no one questions it. He's a man who will threaten you just to be in his presence. He is a man who's very insecure. He is a man who is evil. He is a man who is full of sin. He's a man who wants his own way. He's a man who is the height of selfishness, the height of self-centeredness. He is a man who does what he wants to do. He is a man, I believe, who is demon-possessed. He is a man that is the epitome of everything that sin has to offer. He's a man of overwhelming political power, lavishes all the materialism of his day upon himself, does anything he wants to do, every worldly pleasure you want to have. He is a man who lives exactly the way sin and self would want to live. But he's dead. He's dead. And if you want to say, well, God punished him. Yeah, God got him. I'll tell you, hey, he threatened the Christ out and God, he's gone. That's not true. Isn't it interesting that God waited it out? Sent Jesus off to exile. Brought him into Egypt. Stayed there. Waiting it out. Until what happened? Herod runs his course. God didn't do anything to Herod. Well, why did Herod die? He killed himself. This is not a result of the punishment of God. There's no indication in the passage that that's taking place at all. This is a result of what? The sin in Herod's life. Herod took a gun and shot himself in the foot. Herod brought this all on himself. Herod literally wallowed in his own selfishness and self-centeredness and literally destroyed his own life. Herod literally heaped death upon himself, and in the mess of his own life, in the death that he literally brought about in his own living, it caught him, and he's dead. Herod is dead. Isn't that interesting? God isn't going to punish you. He doesn't need to. You'll do it yourself. God doesn't need to slap you upside the head. You'll walk into the wall. See, he doesn't need to do that. God's not out to get you. God's not out to put you down. You just go ahead, live for yourself, but you're dead. You're dead. It'll catch you. Always does. Jesus is born. Herod's dead. Contrast. Now, what I want you to do is, I want you to take both of those pictures. I want you to bring them right down here. And I want you to contrast them with each other. Over here, moral dilemma, overwhelming mess, can't get out, but Jesus is born. Over here, Herod, full of sin, full of hatred, full of disease, full of the disease of sin, full of self-centeredness, full of all that's wrong, full of that, and he's dead. Now, Jesus is born, Herod is dead. I want you to bring that right down here, and it's a contrast. He's contrasting that with each other. Let's look at this side of the contrast. Jesus is born. What's that filled with? Oh, friends, the passage of Jesus is born is filled with overwhelming response. When you read about it, your heart just begins to beat fast. I wish you'd never heard the Christmas story before, and I could tell you for the first time, you'd go, whoa, your eyes would bug out, your mouth would drop open. You would be absolutely startled, because what's going on when Jesus is born is response. The whole story is filled with response. In fact, it starts with Jesus himself. The second member of the Trinity has leaped off his throne and has literally taken on flesh and joined us in our humanity. Why did he do that? He's responding to the dream of the Trinity. There's no resistance in Jesus. It's yes, I'm in. Yes, you can count on me. Yes, I want to go. And to the whole dream of the Trinity, Jesus is responding and saying, yes, turn me loose. Away I go. I'm joining mankind. And Jesus is responding. Look at the angels who are filling the sky. And what are they doing? They're responding. Oh, from the depth of their heart, they're doing what? They're singing, man. They're singing glory to God in the highest. Can you imagine that? They're spectators. They aren't going to be able to join in on this redemptive process, but they're going to stand back and be a spectator to the wonder of all that God is doing, and they're responding from the depths of their heart. Oh, shepherds are gathering around saying, what is going on? Then they're running wild all over town. We've seen him. We've seen the Christ child, and they're responding. They can't, oh, the exaltation of Christ in their lives. Oh, the excitement in their being. They're running everywhere telling about the Christ child. We've seen him. He's been born. They're responding. They're responding. They're responding. Oh, the planets are responding. Stars are talking, man. Wise men are hearing that response. They're beginning to respond. They got on camels, rode around for 2 years looking for this Christ child. Oh, 2 years on a camel? Come on, what a sacrifice. They had an army traveling with them. Ended up in Jerusalem. They're up and down the streets. Where is he? Where is he? Where is he? And it's all about, we're here. You can count on us. We brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh. We're in. We want to be a part of this. So they're responding. Planets are responding. Angels are responding. Christ himself is responding. Everybody's responding. Simeon the old man is responding. Anna is responding. Mary is responding. Be it unto me according to your word, your handmaiden. No questions, no complaint, no, well, what about my reputation? No defense, no resistance. Just, here I am. Let it happen to me. Joseph is responding. Yes, an angel of the Lord appears in the night hour, and he's saying, yes, I'm in. I'm in. The whole thing is filled with response. Yes, you can count on me. I'm in. I'm available. Come on, Jesus. And Jesus is born in the midst of that response. Wow. That's the picture over here. What's the picture over here? Chapter 2, verse 19. Herod is dead. Let's go a little deeper in the Herod thing. What's this Herod all about? Very insecure. You know where insecurity comes from? Protecting, guarding, fighting, resisting. See, insecurity is all about self-centeredness. One of the historians of that hour reported that the reputation of Herod among all the kings of the earth, what they would say about him would be this: it's better, think about this, it's better to be Herod's hog than it is his son. That doesn't make much sense to you, does it? Better to be Herod's hog. See, Herod was half Jewish, so he couldn't eat hogs. So he didn't kill hogs. But if you were his son, he killed most of them. So you're better to be Herod's hog. Why did he kill his sons? The threat of it. They might take over my throne. They might, it's a self-centered view of protect, guard, fight against. You're not gonna, don't cross that line. He appointed his brother-in-law high priest. Next day had him drown in the royal swimming pool. By his own testimony, he had his wife killed, the woman, he said, the only woman he really ever loved. Wouldn't you like to be loved by him? Even when you read the scriptures, what's it all about? Wise men come saying, hey, where's your new king? Herod gets in on it. Oh, this is a threat. This is a threat. It's only a baby. This is a threat. There's not going to be another king. I am the king. And his self-centeredness takes over. He brings the wise men in. He cons them. You know that. He cons them. In fact, in verse 8, chapter 2, he turns to them and says, go and find the young child. And when you found him, bring back word to me. I want to come and worship him too. Yes, I want to get in on this. It's a lie. He's a con. He's always manipulating, got the hidden agenda, always pulling the strings. You're never straightforward, never know what he's thinking, and never knowing the truth. He's always behind the scene and stuff. In fact, when they didn't come back, it says he got angry, verse 16, exceedingly angry. His anger, see, it's all about self-centeredness and anger and hatred and protect and guard, and you're not gonna, and I'll take care of this. How far are you going to go, Herod? Hey, I'll kill every baby boy in Bethlehem and the surrounding districts. That's what it takes? I don't care. What about the moms? Who cares about moms? What about the dads? I don't care about dads. What about the families? I don't care about the families. What about your kingdom? I don't care about that. Nobody's going to walk into I'm the king here. And it's a picture of self-centeredness and self-sourcing and self. It's a picture of carnality. It's a picture, the heart of sin. And ladies and gentlemen, think about this, if there was ever going to be a time that selfishness and self-centeredness is going to win, I'm not talking about half-hearted selfishness. I'm not talking about kind of selfish. I'm not talking about, some selfish, self-centered tendency. I'm talking about all out, down to it. If selfishness, self-centeredness, self-sourcing is ever going to win, and you're going to stand back and say, woo, that worked out, this should be the time. He's dead. He's dead. He's dead. It killed him. Over here on this side, Jesus is born in the midst of responding and glory and praise and yes and why victory and over here, Herod's dead in the midst of self-centeredness and selfishness and self-sourcing and protecting and guard and contrast. Now here's what's so intriguing. This really intrigues me. That's the beginning of the life of Jesus. I mean, he's a babe. Go to the other end. Crucifixion. Same picture. See, everything Matthew's trying to tell you at the birth of Christ, he turns around and tries to tell you at the death of Christ. Same picture. Same picture. Crucifixion. Let's go to Jesus before he's crucified. Hey, Jesus, wanted to ask you a question. There's some rumors really spreading around strong that Judas is betraying you and he's going to get a group up and they're going to come and get you. I just wanted to find out, Jesus, what are you going to do about it? Nothing? What? You got to be kidding me. Surely you're going to get your disciples together. I mean, machine guns. I mean, this crowd. You fed 5,000 men. You ought to be able to get some of them to rally around you and fight back. Don't think so. Oh, come on, Jesus. Surely with all that miracle power you've got, you could zap some people and straighten this. Don't think I will. Don't think I will. Well, Jesus, you got to protect your ministry. You got to protect what you've started here. You got to, at least write a book. Don't think I will. Don't think I will. Well, the least you could do, Jesus, is run. No, in fact, I've got my bags packed. I'm headed for Jerusalem now. Jesus, this doesn't compute in my brain. You're not going to lift your little finger. You're not going to do anything. You're not going to resist. You're not going to protect. You're not going to guard. You're just going to let it. If that's the way you feel about it, you deserve to be crucified. Just go ahead and let them nail you and ruin your whole ministry. Disciples will scatter. The whole thing will be gone. You deserve, hey, if you aren't going to fight for yourself and defend and go at it, hey, you deserve, go on. What a loser. Ladies and gentlemen, 3 days. He's raised from the dead. He ascends to the right hand of the Father. He's crowned King of Kings and Lord of Lords. You tell me what he lost. And we say, woo, winner! Winner. Over here, contrast. Leaders of Israel. Can you see them getting together after the crucifixion of Jesus, having a party, whacking each other on the back, saying, whoa, we sure had to have a lot of committee meetings, didn't we? Woo, and yeah, it was some night hours, I'll tell you that. But we finally got it done. We got rid of Jesus. We got rid of the troublemaker. You know, if he'd have had his way, the whole sacrificial structure would be done away with. We wouldn't have had any sacrifice lambs. You know what that would have done to the temple and its budget? Good night. We sure go. It's a good thing we got rid of him. I'm telling you, know what he was leading? The young people. We're following him and breaking all kinds of rules that we have at the church, and we can't have that. Good night. If Jesus had got by, we wouldn't have any laws at all. We worked hard, but we fought, we defended, we protected, we guarded. We've got to save our church. We've got to save our traditions. We've got to save our positions. We've got to save I'm chairman of the board. I got to protect that. We win. Do you know that within just a few years, Jerusalem went down? There wasn't one stone of the temple on top of the other. In fact, historians tell us it was like a plowed field. It was that smooth. The temple disappeared. And do you realize that Israel ceased to be a nation, and that from that time, about 60 to 1948, they didn't exist? Their little house of cards came crumbling down. They fought, they protected, they guarded, and they saved the day. Sure they did. Do you get it? Over here's a guy that says, give it your best shot. He wins. Over here is guard, protect, fight. They lose. Does that tell you anything? Manley, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard. I know. You should read what Jesus said. Seek to save your life. Whoops. You lost it. Lose your life. Whoops. You found it. I'll do what I want to do. Whoops. You don't get to. You're in jail. You're trapped by habits. You're overwhelmed. You aren't doing what you want to do. See what self does to you? Guard, protect. Oh. And your little house comes crumbling down, and Herod's dead. Herod's dead. Protect nothing. Respond. Whew. Jesus is born. Wow. That's the story. That's the story. Now, it's really interesting that in verse 1 of chapter 2, Jesus was born. And chapter 2, verse 19, Herod was dead, but Herod was dead. Those two statements are identical, absolutely identical in grammar. I know this is going to excite you. Absolutely identical in grammar. That's why they're in contrast. Because he on purpose used the same identical grammar on both one. The word day, both of them are participles, acting as adverbs, modifying the main subject. So the grammar structure of both is exactly the same, except one thing. Jesus was born. Hang on. Passive verb, passive voice. Herod was dead. Active. Wow. Isn't that amazing? Well, what's the active mean? Active, you know, means that the subject is responsible for the action of the verb. Herod is dead. Well, who's responsible for his death? Well, God killed him. Herod took a gun and blew his brains out. No, Herod shot himself in the foot. Herod killed himself. Herod, by his selfishness and by his defending and by his grabbing and by his carnality and by his sin, he literally brought himself to death. Jesus was born. That's life. I know. Where'd that come from? Jesus was acted upon. Isn't it interesting that Herod is dead? And everybody goes, glad of that. An obstacle to the whole plan of God has just been removed. An obstacle to all that God wanted to get done has just been set aside. Herod's dead. Isn't it interesting? Jesus is born. Oh, it is the plan of God unfolding. And ladies and gentlemen, you have a choice on this Christmas Sunday. Are you going to be an obstacle or an accomplishment? What's going to determine that? Style. Style? Yeah, your style. What's your style? Protect? Guard? You're not gonna. Nobody's gonna. I'm going to. Over against. Give it your best shot. Now, if you're like I am, chances are you are. You look at that and say, dozens of times I've said, I've seen this. And dozens of times I've said, I'm not going to guard. I'm not going to protect. I'm not going to fight back. I'm not going to do it. But I do. I do. Dozens of times I've said, I'm going to be like Jesus. I'm just going to depend and lean and respond. But I don't. Dozens of times I've read in Ephesians chapter 5 where Paul says, guys, ladies, The way to handle your home is how? Well, just tell her a thing or two. Yeah, we got married. I took off my pants and handed them to her. And I said, put them on. She said, they're too big. And I said, remember that. Paul doesn't say that. Paul says, man, well, how are you going to handle your home? Oh, wives, submit. Well, he'll walk all over me. Then you shouldn't have married him. Husbands, submit. And when wife and husband submit, what happens? Oh, you're acted upon. And you live. Well, you're not gonna, well, I earn the money. And you're dead. Children, how should you live? What should be your style? Well, rebel against your parents. They don't have a right to tell you. And you're dead. Children, obey. And the word obey there doesn't mean do everything they say. The word obey means come under the influence. Come under the influence. Listen to. Slaves, he says, how should you live? Well, they have no right. They're not going to do. I'll spit in their coffee when I serve it. Which you couldn't tell if they did or not. Now, he says, slaves. Well, preacher, I want to be like that. I've said I'm going to be like that. I can't be like that. Jesus has to move upon you. This is a divine activity of God in your life. He's got to change your mind. Would you let him? Would you let him? Jesus, be born in me. Yes, I'm in. I'm responding. I want. Fists are down. No cover up. No hiding. No power play. No politics. No conniving. No conning. No hidden agenda. Just right down to it, God. Here I am. Here I am. Here I am. Would you do something and be born in me? Be born in me. Deeply, deeply apologize today, dear God. Because I've taken a gun and I've shot myself in the foot and then blamed you. God, why'd you let that happen to me? Dear Jesus, what on earth was I thinking? Could you be born in me on Christmas Day? And I invite you, dear Jesus, in this hour, every ounce of Herod style, every ounce of the leaders of Israel style, every ounce of self-sourcing, every ounce of self-centeredness, every ounce that brings death. Oh God, I've spilled death on my kids. I've spilled death on my grandkids. I've spilled death. I've spilled death on my church. I've spilled death into the community, in my society. And I wondered, what is going on? I live for myself and spilled death. Could you be born in me, and could I spill some life? Ooh, could I just walk around spilling life everywhere? Don't be easy on me, Lord. Crawl into the back burners of my mind, the inner recesses of my heart. Root out, cleanse, stamp out. Be born in the dark alleys of my soul. Our heads are bowed. Altar's open. Preacher, why would you think I'd ever go to that altar? I'm not going to that altar. Why not? Why wouldn't you? Well, what people think, what does it matter? Why does it matter to you? Are you so full of yourself that you can't admit you have a need? That's why we use the altar. You can't hide. Not in this process. You think you're going to hide? Secretly let God do something in your life? Not a chance. Not a chance. Would you let Him search you out today? Would you let Him change the way you think about some things, all things, everything? Would you let Jesus be born in you? Would you let Him enter some new arenas, areas of your life? Are you in a mess? Can't be straightened out? There are no answers? It doesn't get better? Would you let Him be born in your mess? Seek with me. Seek with me. If you can't kneel, you can come and stand. Be obedient.